live in
Memphis.
yes, I'm at the Sheraton downtown in the hallway. Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Digital Marketing live show number 140, live from downtown Memphis. I'm one of your hosts, Lauren Gray, and with me is Mr. Robert Cole, live from Irving, Texas.
That's right. Beautiful downtown Irving. Well, actually, not downtown, I would say.
Not downtown, but close enough.
Suburban Irving. Yes.
Suburban Irving. For those wondering why I'm dressed the way I am, I'm having the pleasure of being one of the speakers for HSMAI's traveling roadshow called Rocket, which is Revenue Optimization, Continued Education, and Training. And we do a 3-city tour in a whole week, and we do 3 series of those per year. And this series is between Houston, New Orleans, and now our final venture today is in Memphis, which we're about to experience some bad weather. So I'm hoping my flight, as I scooch out, I'll be speaking on stage and then literally running, grabbing my suitcase and hitting an Uber and hitting it to the airport to try to catch early enough flight out that I don't get stuck in Memphis. Not that it's a bad city. And I'm flying a puddle jumper, no less. So I get to enjoy bad weather as I'm leaving on a puddle jumper to make it to Charlotte for a connection. I don't know. It's Friday the 13th, dude. I don't think I got good odds.
Now, wait. Well, and this Rocket, I would be, it's Friday the 13th. Rocket, I thought that you were talking about revenue management set to like a rock music sort of theme. Sort of thing. Is that, I always thought that's what, I haven't attended one of the sessions, but I believe that's what it was. And you look at the whole Buddy Holly thing. Lauren, be very careful. Please.
I know. Well, here's the thing. I do put rock music in. I play AC/DC Thunderstruck because I'm the after lunch program. So I kick in, hey, Mr. Ed.
Look at you all fancy schmancy.
I know.
I sent out a memo, but obviously nobody got it. Today was dress up day. But Mr. Ed was in on with Flip 2. Hey, Mr. Ed.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy. I was just telling Robert, being that it's Friday the 13th and I'm flying a puddle jumper just ahead of a major storm coming through Memphis. Robert's invoking the Buddy Holly theory at this point, so.
Great.
Hey, Mr. Tim Peter with Tim Peter and Associates. How are you, sir? Oh.
Microphone.
Audio.
If you're going to curse at us, at least have the, have the courtesy to have your mic on. So.
Look at how pretty Lauren looks, everybody.
I know. He cleans up pretty good, doesn't he?
It does.
Exactly.
I told you guys I take a shower once a month, and this was the month.
Whether he needs it or not. That's right.
Yeah, whether I need it or not. Exactly right.
Hey, Ed.
Yes.
Little old lady who?
Now, please tell me
God.
you did it in your head that way.
Of course.
Of course I did. Of course I did. Yeah, I was like, oh, for God's sakes, I can't believe he got me with that.
So for those who don't know, we don't like each other. We never talk to each other other than the show.
Never.
And by no means do we ever send email strings that are absolutely. I think we should just write books on the email strings because the dialogue that goes back and forth. But if you gentlemen would be so kind as to illuminate our followings as to what exactly we're referring to and to what happened out of this email string.
So it started with Robert sending out this email to Lauren that made no sense to me for like 3 or 4 replies on it. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, when were we talking about this? And then I finally looked at the image attached, which was a rock band image that happened to have Valen as a member of the band. And that's when I was like, she is a drummer. And I did not know. So then I made a request for if Robert had any rock pictures from Tim Peters' rock days. And, he presented some viable representations of what I think Tim Peters' rock days included. Tim actually then put forth a legitimate picture and a very funny story. And then it turned into Robert saying that I was going to join the band as an expert yodeler, which then made me think of a really stupid dad knock-knock joke where I just responded knock-knock and Tim Peter bit. And he said, who's there? And I said, a little old lady.
And of course I said, a little old lady who?
And I said, I didn't know you could yodel.
And that is the extent of our intellectual dialogue pre-show.
And if you were wondering what these minds do when not on this show, now you know. Nothing of value.
By the way, this might be the first time. I think this was great, actually. I think this is the first time I've ever participated in a knock-knock joke just via email. So the great thing for people who are just listening to this story who were not part of the email thread was literally, there was nothing in the email but knock-knock by who's there, followed by a little old lady. I mean, like it was just perfect, like knock joke
with
perfect
with
knock
a group
joke
of
etiquette.
with a group of people who did not reply. It was just between the two.
Yep. Just between the two of them. It was funny. Yeah, it did. It worked out perfectly. Valen, if you get connected, we are on YouTube as the mainstream today. So if you join the audience, we can add you as a presenter. If not, I can send you a presenter's link as well. She'd indicated on the email that she wanted to jump on the show today. So I want to make sure that we got her in because I'm not going to be here.
And at the risk,
yes,
and at the
I'm not long for
our new segment
call today.
Our new segment where she does a drum solo, like a 13-minute drum solo at about the 45-minute mark, I think would be good. So.
Yeah.
And I'll follow over that.
No, Telecaster?
Nashville Telecaster, noted by the third pickup in the middle. Right
Look at
that. That is the Nashville.
Did you go to the Did you go to the Gibson store ever in Nashville? The place that they have there, the Gibson store?
I am about to admit one of the true embarrassing moments of my life. Into Nashville. It is on the list. It's like the #1 place on the list. I've never been in the entire world, really. And somehow I've never made it to Nashville. I have done the Martin factory tour in Pennsylvania, which is one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. But no, I've never been to Nashville.
If you make it to Nashville and there's any way that we can meet you there, I would love to travel Nashville with a musician that would like point out stuff as we're going through and listening to bands and drinking moonshine.
My wife, by the way,
your date.
My wife would be thrilled to have somebody go to Nashville with me who isn't her. Because
you know who we should invite to that is, do you guys know Bob Magliozzi from Sendai?
Oh, yeah.
So Bob's ties to the music industry are strong. Bob was in a 80s hair band.
Nice.
Like one that toured with the big 80s hair bands.
Nice.
And he has remained in the music industry. So he would be a good one to go to Nashville with.
That'd be awesome. I would enjoy that to no end. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Now there's one other place that's a little bit more off the beaten path, but the Waukesha County Historical Society in Wisconsin has, and it's under renovation right now, they're sprucing it up, is the Les Paul Museum. And Les Paul, the inventor of the electric guitar, and they have the pretty close.
An inventor of the electric guitar.
And of it, yes, there is some debate on it.
Yes,
and thank you to everyone
the original railroad
and digital marketing and guitars today.
Right.
But yes,
well, I'll share with you the best
railroad spike and things like that.
The
log. Yes.
The best guitar story I have is I was fortunate that my wife was on the opening team of BB King's in Orlando.
Oh, nice.
So that means I got to go to the private opening where BB King came down and did his own little private concert and told stories. And a lot of the people who were affiliated with him in the early days also came out with this. And I actually got to sit at the table with them and kind of hear some of the stories. It's probably one of the coolest music experiences I've had.
Very cool. Well, I won't digress heavily. Most people don't know this. Some of you know this, but I spent the first 8 or 9 years of my professional career in the music industry. I actually started out. I majored in music in college. I worked in recording studios pretty much starting when I was about 16 or 17. And then I worked for Jackson Charvel Guitars during the 80s, which talk about hairband stuff. And worked for Kai Professional Digital Audio for a bunch of years. And we used to go to the NAMM show every year. So I'm going to turn this into a hotel story. So the NAMM show is the National Association of Music Merchandisers. And they have a big show every year in LA in the winter. Winter NAMM is always in Anaheim. And Summer NAMM is all over the place. But they made this huge mistake of having the Summer NAMM show one year in Las Vegas, which, of course, no one showed up to the show floor because all these old music store owners and musicians and stuff were just out gambling and drinking the entire time they were there. But the Anaheim Hilton in Anaheim, California, is the main hotel where the show is, the Winter NAMM show. And the hotel bar on Saturday night of the NAMM show looks an awful lot like the cantina scene from Star Wars. Creatures from all over the galaxy come wandering through. But you get really cool stuff. Like I had drinks one night with Herbie Hancock, and another night Chick Corea was just sitting there playing piano in the lobby bar. The guys from Kiss were holding court. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were holding court one night. Bonnie Raitt. But it was just weird because people would come through and they'd have a drink or two and then they'd leave, and it was supposed to be like normal, but you'd get all these interesting hangers on, coming through as well. And I did that from the age of probably about 24 to about 26.
1924 to 1926.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Actually, it's funny that you say this, Ed, because this is how I made the transition to digital. So I was working for Akai Professional Audio, Jackson Charvel Guitars. We were the owner of Jackson Charvel Guitars. Today, that's owned by Fender, but at the time, it was a separate company. And we were the North American distributor for Akai Professional Digital Audio. And in mid to late 1995, I built their first website. And realized, wow, this is way more fun than what I'm doing for a living.
So this was shortly before you moved to Death Row Records and helped build their first website, right?
That's exactly right. Yes, because you look at me and the first thing you think is hardcore hip hop.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hello.
So anyway.
Hardcore hip hop. What's up, boys? Hey. Speaking of hardcore hip hop, Stuart Butler from Fuel Travel.
What happened to Lauren? He got all respectable.
So anyway.
Lauren's actually earning a living this week by doing a road show.
Oh wow!
For
royalties of the show on paying.
No. Hey, listen.
HSMA.
Everyone else may call it Rocket, but we all have to remember that initially Lauren thought it was Rosset.
I did. I thought it was Russet. And I sang it to the Elton John song. Russet Man. Russet Man.
That's so funny.
That's classic. All right, so how about some news stories?
Yeah, why don't we actually do something that's about hospitality?
That's just
I don't know. I think we should do music stuff. I think, really?
So before we go to the news, I just want to put out a PSA. So we're attending VRMA next week, and please, for the love of God, if you are a vendor in this industry going to attend a trade show, stop sending garbage spam emails to attendees of the show. Put some thought into what would be worthwhile to say to the people you'd like to meet, and from the bare minimum, just like make sure if the person's like a target or not. Because listen, I can't tell you, still to this day, I get high-tech emails because I've spoken at a couple of high-techs where I'm literally targeted as a hotelier, which means you did not look even on LinkedIn to understand who I am. You're making it harder for all of us.
Right. That's right.
So please put some thought into your pre-show and post-show communications. Be respectful, because it is really bad for your brand in this industry to be doing that.
Right.
So, and some of these guys
door locks anytime soon. Anyone? Yeah.
No, there are two in particular who are just so doggedly determined that I haven't responded. I haven't done it, and they're just going and go, and it's like, I never asked you to do this. One of them was a setup that I hadn't seen before, that somebody said, somebody said you were interested in this, and they actually had it bounce from one person to another. It's like, no. I'm going to finally do a count when they give up. And then maybe you sent 86 email or whatever the ridiculous number will be. And I'm not in your target market. I have no interest. I didn't ask for it. What are you doing? I mean, just
But what's even worse is I do the nice first response. Hey, not a hotel. I'm a vendor. And I generally get a response. Oh, sorry about that. And then I get an email from them again.
The next one, they don't take you on.
And it's
the next year.
Well, they're shooting themselves in the foot. Not only are they pissing us off and hurting all of us as good marketers, but they're also not helping their own business because they're alienating people. That the best thing you can do before a trade show is pregame, getting people primed to want to come and find you and have a real genuine conversation about how you can solve their problems. That's way better than grabbing people that are walking by that have no interest in stopping. So it's a double negative.
And they just look stupid. Right? They just look dumb.
Yeah. We have a Slack channel dedicated to it.
To just dumb people in general?
An internal Slack channel that's dedicated to the horrible marketing communication put out by vendors in this industry.
I want to get added to your Slack channels because
our Slack channels
are good ones. Yeah.
They are really fun.
I'll bet.
Yeah. So, hey, before we get into news, Valen.
Yes.
Beyond the rock star that obviously not all of us knew you were. You guys had some big news recently.
Yep. So yes, I am indeed a rock star, but I try to keep those two parts, work and rock star, private.
And you're like 90s grunge rock star, at least from that.
Yeah. I am definitely sort of on the garage grunge rock side of things.
Now, was that just for the Bandcamp thing? Was that a name you came up with that, or is that a group that you regularly perform with?
No, that was
Her
just
Majesty's Hammer.
It's a great band. That is a great band.
Yeah, and so we had one of our band members is an artist.
Oh,
look at that.
Nice merch. She has merch.
How is that? Wait, how is that not on your LinkedIn profile?
Right.
Oh my gosh.
That should be the banner background image that you can do.
That's not a bad idea, actually. No, that band name was just for. So this is a little fundraising weekend. So nationally, and I think in Western Europe too. There's a little not-for-profit called Girls Rock Camp, and they provide to girls 8 to 14. They provide, especially lower-income girls, musical instruction, after-school programs, summer music camps, and this was a fundraiser. So you had to be. It's all gender specific. So women over 25, 3-day music camp where you showed up, and if you didn't know how to play your instrument, they would teach you how. Put you in a band with 3 to 4 other women whom you've never met before. You showed up Friday morning. On Sunday night, you had gotten together, gelled up as a band, written an original song, and you performed it in a public nightclub on Sunday night.
That's awesome.
So cool. Awesome. That is so cool.
Fantastic. Yeah. So there's there's one in New York, there's one in San Francisco, there's one in Dallas. So there's a lot of them across the US. And they're a great organization. So everything from the fundraiser this weekend, they did the fundraiser right. So it's for the rock camp in Boston, it's $500. Everything is donated. All the food, all the instruction, all the band coaches, all the groupies to move the equipment, because it's full rock. I mean, it's electric band, electric bass, guitar, full kits. So it was just a great experience.
That's cool. That's really cool.
That's really awesome. And it's all women bands.
Yeah. So the entity, the underlying not-for-profit entity is all about giving girls who are in less than ideal circumstances, who are going through the toughest time in their life, which is puberty, had a skill and a way to interact with other people in a positive way, learn to play some music, gain some confidence performing in front of people. Because the girls' camps in the summer are basically the same structure, just takes longer. They start on Monday, they perform, I think, on Saturday afternoons. But they do the same thing. They've never played an instrument before. They get together, they show up, they put them in a band, they create a song, they play it in public.
That's so cool.
That's badass. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's great. Really cool. It was really, really great.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks,
Good luck. Good luck, Rossiting.
Rossiting. Bye, guys.
Right.
I'll catch up with you later. Bye now.
Bye, Lauren.
So I'll stop talking about my rock star self and talk about my Nor1 self. So yes, we acquired a small company called Stay Delightful last month. They were a small company. They were actually a startup. They actually came out of the Travelport Incubator Labs in Denver. And they were a little late to the market. They're sort of Alice kind of communication on property. But we didn't have anything like that, and a couple of our competitors are starting to move in that direction. So it was a nice sort of acqui-hire for us, where we got the IP, and the founder So he's come on board. Jonathan Lee has come on as vice president, and one of our vice presidents. And we have the Stay Delightful IP, which we have rebranded called eDirect. And we're in the process of basically pulling it onto our existing platform. So for Nor1, it extends our merchandising capabilities from pre-arrival, check-in, now on-stay, and post-stay as a way to communicate to guests and allow the hotel to merchandise whatever it's got to be able to put that in front of guests at any course during that cycle.
That's exciting.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it.
Exciting, not as exciting as the Rock Band.
Not nearly.
Yeah. I still got some Rock Band hangover. It's Friday. I was done on Sunday, but you know.
Yeah.
I was hoping my last band could get excited. Oedipus Rex could get invited. Oedipus Rex and the Mothers.
Oedipus Rex and the Mothers. Very nice. Very nice.
You know, I will say coming up with a name is hard, right?
It sure is.
So being able to come up with something, I mean, and this is sort of generic across all parts of your life, but to come up with a name for something that isn't stupid, right? And isn't just juvenile, but that has some value and has some kind of meaning without saying this is a rock band, right? And also doing that in conjunction with 4 other people
right.
can be its own challenge, right?
Oh,
Band name by committee. It was there's a lot of that was a life lesson in and of itself going through that function.
So
Ed
Stewart, any rock band stories from your histories? No?
I was in a death metal band in high school.
Nice!
but not one of us could play an instrument. Now we did.
Well, that's why you
the way to do it.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of death metal bands. That's sort of par for course.
Right.
Yeah.
I
We
thought
were
that
called,
was the hallmark of death metal bands.
This is probably true. We called ourselves Swine on Your Spire, and
Another excellent name.
yeah, our first EP that we wrote, it was never recorded, but the first one we wrote was called Pig on a Point. So that was
there you go. It was a concept album.
There was a theme
There was,
there.
yeah. I mean, have we continued down that line? I mean, I wouldn't be here right now on the show, obviously.
Right. But, you know, after a while, you would probably exhaust song names that involve pork in somehow.
Yeah,
right?
porks and putting them on something spiky. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, let's see.
And I was in a
hotel news.
I was in an alternative. Wait, I was in Seattle alternative band. Unfortunately, we were about 15 years before Nirvana, and I tell the guy who was kind of the leader of it. And we wrote original songs that he could have been Kurt Cobain. He really could have. Mature guy, but that's too early.
That's a disturbing thing to say to someone.
Yeah.
I see you as the type of person who it would have ended badly.
He was a tortured. He had a lot of songs. All of his songs were like unrequited love and things like. It was very.
But then he'd have to kill himself,
anyway.
right? And so
that was my point.
Oh, he'd do that. He would do that. He would do that for the legend, I think.
Yeah, either that or Marry Courtney Love, and I'm not sure which of those is worse.
It's kind of the same.
Maybe. Maybe. Yep. So I played bass in the style of Sid Vicious.
Wow.
Self-taught.
Although I
did play piano.
what does that mean?
I could read music. What?
What does that mean? I
had a very large.
Tim
Tim will appreciate this from a gear perspective. A very large sunburst, hollow-bodied Vox bass, which was actually very cool. A very cool bass, somewhat rare. But
I tell you what, for next week's show, I will bring my Ibanez Artcore bass down and set that up behind me instead. That's my sunburst, semi-hollow body, about that thick, about that big.
Yeah.
So should I set up next week in front of my kit?
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So,
all right.
While I wasn't in a band, I will.
He was a groupie.
I will at least share.
He was a Spice Girls groupie.
Prior to my married,
that was me as well.
Prior to my married life, I was a karaoke DJ.
Wow.
Really? That takes some talent. That's pretty hard work.
Yeah.
Because also you have to sit through everybody who sings karaoke and
drunken. karaoke is.
Yeah,
Well, is there any other kind, Ed?
Early karaoke? No, see, early in the night, you get the people who are actually musically talented who come out and sing. And then as the night goes on, they leave.
Right.
And
And the people who are afraid drink a whole bunch to get over their inhibitions. And
and then they scream into a
right.
microphone.
Right. That's right.
Yes.
All right.
So now
how
we
about
know.
hospitality news.
I was just going to say, now we know how Ed tolerates all of us. He's been, that is the bar that he has set for, drunken screaming karaoke.
Right. We'll never be that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Valen hasn't spent enough time with us.
No, she hasn't.
Yet. Yeah.
Right. Not on camera, anyway.
No.
Okay, guys, pick a story. What do you want to talk about? We got a bunch of them here.
Well, let's do Facebook's updated product terms. Actually, let's just talk about Facebook in general. Mark Zuckerberg had kind of a big week, and the government kind of not as big of a week. So
yeah, where do we go with that?
So well, let's talk. I mean, I would love to talk about. Did any of you watch Mark Zuckerberg testifying this week?
Yeah, I watched almost every minute of it. It was compelling TV. I mean, it was on in the background, but it was very eye opening on a number of levels.
Yeah.
Particularly the Senate, who was just it was some people related it to like a tech support call with your grandfather.
But here's the thing: they put as much effort into preparing for that hearing as we put into this show. The difference is
now wait.
That's unfair to me.
I actually think that they do put in the effort. The problem is they don't know what they're talking about. There's a great story. Kal Penn. There's a fantastic story, right? Kal Penn, the actor, worked in the Obama administration. He was part of a community outreach to young people, immigrant folks, things along those lines. And he told a great story of how Biz Stone and Ev Williams were going to speak to a congressional panel. So these are mostly staffers, right? And they're talking about social and they're talking about digital and things like that. And Kal Penn hung around to watch this. Like he'd gone for his session and then he sat there to watch what was going on because he thought, Biz Stone and Ev Williams, I can learn some things from these guys. And so they're explaining social to these, politicians' aides, right? And they're trying to explain how social works and things like that. And one of the aides goes, excuse me. The congressman knows how social works. I mean, he has over 4,000 followers. And they were just like, oh my God. Oh my, so I think they prepare. I think they actually prepare, but they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, like asking the gem of like, how do you make money?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was waiting for one of them to say, I can't log in. Can you help me?
Yeah. Yeah.
My favorite part.
He did a good job not talking down to these
man. He was so calm and collected the whole time. He did not get riled. Even when people attacked him, personally about his lack of knowledge and stuff. Yeah.
Well, you have to have emotions in order to be affected by those things. He is a robot. Yeah.
So. There are some great Zuckerberg memes out there. There are some fantastic ones.
My probably favorite parts were when they would ask him a question that was somewhat technical but made absolutely no sense. It was complete gibberish. Someone technical had written it that didn't really understand. Clearly the congressperson or the senator did not know anything about what they were saying. They were just reading it off a piece of paper, and Zuckerberg would go, I'm not sure I understand the question. Would you clarify what you're trying to ask me? And they just would repeat the exact same question because they had no way to clarify it. They didn't understand what they were asking.
Because somebody else wrote it.
Yeah. It was embarrassing.
The RSA News on Twitter, which is one of the funniest Twitter accounts. It's supposed to be tweets from North Korea. Had a great line. They showed a picture of Mark Zuckerberg, and he's got a frowny face, and everything. And it says, U.S. populace enraptured by footage of old men yelling at malfunctioning artificial intelligence.
It's so funny.
But listen, here's the scary part about this is there are a lot of parts of our government that need to catch up and change and to create laws around the way society has changed. And what we saw this week is none of our current politicians who were put up at the forefront. And you're guessing they were put up because they were the ones who were
the most technically
best suited.
Well, it's the Commerce Committee. It's what they're supposed to do.
Right. So they should no longer be doing what they do. There should be some type of program that if we have to, and we need governing around these areas, we really do, but it needs to be good governing. And in order for it to be good governing, it needs to be someone who has a fundamental understanding of what it is. And, that is just
living in a dream world. It's not going to happen. There's going to be a dramatic overreach from government that's going to occur in the next 6 to 12 months.
I actually think there won't be, though.
No, I think they're just going to copy the
Depends what happens in the midterms.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
If that swings left, man, that's going to be a dramatic overreach.
I hear you, but I don't know. I think if you look at what happened to the share price, the street sure doesn't think anything's going to change.
Right.
Well, they think that Zuckerberg came out of it relatively or almost entirely unscathed. He handled himself.
That's what I mean, right?
Oh yeah.
But that doesn't mean government's not stupid. It just means that Zuckerberg's not stupid, you know?
Right.
So
but here's the thing. He came out unscathed, which means there were already things in his favor. First of all, him and his employees funded most of those people's getting into that office.
No, that's not true. They really did not. There was actually an article on Recode yesterday about Facebook's political spending, and it's not that much.
Yeah.
Facebook, but what about their employees? Like personal political contributions to a party.
They have a lot of lobbyists, but I don't know if they're financial.
Yeah,
No,
not buying it. No,
I don't think
you don't think
care.
the Koch brothers didn't have anything to do with any of those? Yeah, any of those politicians getting into office?
So
sure, but they don't work for Facebook.
Oh.
Right. And
they have investment. They have investment in Facebook.
Yeah, but based on what we saw earlier this week, obviously Facebook doesn't have. Facebook doesn't need to worry about the Congress at this point because they don't know what they're doing, and so it wouldn't be smart.
When does that stop?
But why would Facebook invest in a bunch of people who don't know what they do and don't have any impact on them? So
and Kamala Harris went after him.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So maybe in the next, to Stuart's point, maybe after the midterms and things change, Facebook may suddenly start throwing scads of money at Congress. But up to now, they haven't needed to because Congress is too stupid to understand how to regulate them or even understand what their business model is.
One of my favorite gems that, man, if I was Mark Zuckerberg, like I wouldn't have taken the high road. The politician that was asking him about Facebook allowing targeting by race and gender, I would have just responded going, well, don't you do that in your political ads?
Oh, no. I disagree completely.
You don't think that those politicians are
he did. Yeah, you don't want to throw
him across
gas on the
like
fire.
Very chill, very like I'm here to help, I'm here to be friendly. I'm not very.
Well, there's a reason I'm not Mark Zuckerberg, guys.
Exactly. Exactly.
And you see, just like Lauren today, he wore a suit also, which I believe Lauren picked that up from Zuckerberg. So that's
smartly. He sat on a booster seat that angled him forward. No, it was brilliant because those chairs.
The back of his kept the back of his coat.
Those chairs sink in the back.
Yeah.
And so it was actually brilliant to do that because his posture the entire time, his body language the entire time, some would say was mechanical.
I think the ultimate winner was the people that programmed his responses because he was.
They did a great job.
Yeah. Well,
he even remembered to drink water.
Sorry.
There was
that upgrade.
One of my favorite memes said, "Look, they've taught it how to drink water."
Next time they'll just send Watson.
Yes.
I thought he did a remarkable job, though, with some of the stupid questions. I mean, just his facial expression without just like bugging. Involuntary kind of. He had involuntary. What?
Absolutely. You are.
It's the one time that the thing we pick on him for really paid off.
Oh yeah.
His complete detachment from human condition completely helped him in this.
Yeah,
It
barely
worked
even
in his
worked.
favor.
Okay, so
Yeah.
for hotel marketers, let's talk about that. Right?
Now that we've covered politics and music,
Tim's favorite.
politics,
Tim's favorite.
No. It's not that I mind. I mean, but
Well, this is important though, for hotel marketers because it has
very important for hotel marketers.
dramatic implications.
Yeah.
And it's a good lesson.
certainly.
It's a good lesson, okay? And the lesson is that if you don't know about something that you probably should know about, it may be worthwhile either hiring people to help you understand the basics of it, or figuring out a way to teach yourself what you need to be able to function in the modern world, which understanding social is something that you should have a fundamental knowledge of. Oh, quick show of hands. How many of you were exposed to Cambridge Analytica?
All of us.
No, I had one.
No. You had to download the quiz, but your friends could have downloaded.
Right.
No, it tells you.
No. It was if your friends. No. If your friends did it and your information was exposed, you did get that thing, and I didn't.
Me
Which was
neither.
good. Although I had a bunch.
I don't think
I had
they
a bunch of
everyone
friends who
yet.
did.
They said they were rolling out the
That's
notification,
exactly right.
and I don't think they've completed that yet.
Yeah, so
Well, they have-
out of the woods.
So mine was I had one friend. So I didn't do it, but I had one.
Did you
friend
unfriend
who
them?
did.
Did you call
No,
them
they
up?
don't see, that's the thing. They don't tell you who did it. I want to know. I want to know.
people are
What,
trying
and
to
you had a
figure out.
friend of mine.
If it was
Well,
if it was
fortunately-
one of your parents or an aunt or an uncle or something, are you going to unfriend them?
That's
Right?
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just for being stupid, yeah.
But I was
Well,
like, so I had a conversation with my mother yesterday or the day before, and she said, my mother's 75 or 76, and she said, I hate seeing all those people that they put up as potential friends. You've seen that, right? She was like, and I just keep clicking X, X, X. And I said, Mom, the more you do that, the more people they're going to show you because you are interacting with that function. And she went,
You fuel in the algorithm, for sure.
right.
Yeah.
I said, so she goes, but I don't like to see that. And I said, Mama, just ignore it. Just keep scrolling.
Move past it.
I want to go back to something Ed just said, but because I think there's a lesson there that anyone listening can learn from related to how Congress has handled this situation. And you pointed out that they need to go and find people smarter than them that understand it. And I think they think in their mind they probably have done that. Some of their staffers are technical experts, but the reality is, if someone knows a little bit more than they do, it's easy for someone to sound like an expert on any subject, right? So we find hotels all the time that have their so-called experts of SEO or experts of digital marketing or whatever it is that are completely clueless because they were duped or they, because they don't know anything. This guy looks like a demigod to them. So
it's the tallest midget syndrome.
Exactly. So when you're looking for these people that you're going to rely on, your business is going to rely on, don't just look at it from your perspective. Go and find people that are at the peak of this industry that do have knowledge and have them vet the people before you hire them, because that way you're going to have a better team and you're going to end up with better results from that.
And here's the thing, no matter how complicated something may seem, the people who are truly experts in it can explain it to you in a way that you can understand.
That's exactly right.
And if
100%.
anyone is explaining anything to you in a way that you cannot get your head around, then they do not understand what it is that they're explaining to you.
Right. Find somebody who can.
Yeah,
and
right.
the reality is there are a lot of these things that are very complicated, right? They are. You can break them down into simple terms. You absolutely can. And if you can't explain it to a 10-year-old, you can't explain it. I mean, blockchain. Blockchain is essentially a database at its core, right? Okay, then we can build from that because you all know what a database is, right?
Oh, you don't know what a database is? Think Microsoft Excel.
Exactly.
Except it's capable of doing more than Microsoft Excel.
Exactly.
Oh, you don't know what Microsoft Excel is?
Right.
Think the calculators with the
13
long
bar
ribbon.
But exactly.
Think of 13-column ledger sheets. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Exactly. You ought to be able to break this stuff down.
But if you understand something at its core, you can explain it to someone who has completely no understanding of what it is that you're explaining to them. And so this is, and listen, I know this because I learned it the hard way. And I learned it because I started a software company without knowing how to write software. I quickly had to learn.
How'd that work out? No, I'm kidding. I know that worked out.
It worked out well.
I know.
But it's because I learned quickly. But yeah, I mean, listen, you own a business or you're managing a department or you have some level of responsibility. Well, that responsibility, no matter what is written, does include continuing to educate yourself on the things that are important to your job function and the people around you.
Exactly.
Well, and with a software company, it's particularly important, especially if you're on the business side, to be able to clearly communicate the requirements to the developers and the technical team, because otherwise it gets really, really ugly. You have to be very, very precise.
There's nothing worse.
This is what we're trying to do.
There's nothing worse than getting a piece of software delivered to you that was exactly as you asked and it didn't work. And you're like,
yeah, exactly.
What happened here? Well, we built it exactly as you asked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One of my all-time favorites. Now, this was a tiny requirement, but it was a funny one. We outsourced some development when I worked at Wyndham, and we, to this group, and we were building some international websites, and we told them that all countries should be listed in alphabetical order, right? And we got it back, and literally every single country was in the drop-down listed in alphabetical order, and we were like, "Oh, right, all countries where we have hotels."
Yeah, but you didn't say that.
But we didn't say that. Yeah, exactly. But it was great. It's exactly what Ed's talking about. You learn a lot about how to actually spec stuff correctly when you get specs back.
You really learn how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, but the lesson is
spreading the peanut butter on the bread, you've got to mention the knife. That's really, really important.
And taking the lid off the jar.
Taking the lid off the jar, another good point.
Yes. But the important lesson here is in anything that you don't know what's going on or you're not comfortable, the most important thing is to ask questions.
Right.
And based on the answers you get, you can quickly understand either is the person you're talking to actually knowledgeable in what they're talking about, or are they regurgitating either something they read or something they've heard? Are they using overly jargonized words? Because you don't explain things with jargon.
Right.
Like these are all things that you just have to be on the lookout for. And then the biggest thing is, does it make business sense?
Right.
Because you should at least be able to glean that. And if the answer is, I don't know, then again, the person who explained it to you did not explain it correctly to you.
I'll give you a great example of that right now is the new sponsored listings on TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
If you talk to any rep at TripAdvisor and ask them to explain to you the business benefit of being there, they cannot do it. We've had 3 different reps tongue-tied on the phone this week trying to justify why our clients should invest in the platform.
Well, that's because they don't want to say out loud, it helps us sell the company.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
We're actually doing our podcast this afternoon that we're recording is all on this, is on this conspiracy theories that we have related to TripAdvisor right now and why we think they're getting ready to sell.
How was I not invited to that?
Right.
Dude, it's
Ed has some opinions on TripAdvisor.
I have some opinions on TripAdvisor.
I might call you after the show and get some fodder for the podcast. But we're about to put up a blog. Actually, it might be out while we're talking, but there's some crazy stuff going on at TripAdvisor right now that makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yep. They're just trying to figure out how to get that revenue up, how to monetize all these things. There was just
a cost too. They're not supporting the products. They have. Crazy.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, but that
trying to make Wall Street happy.
That type of move worked really well for Dell. Worked really well for Gateway.
Gateway.
Wow. AOL did really well on that type of thinking. Blockbuster did really good.
I didn't know you were old enough to know Gateway.
Yeah, come on. I mean, listen, it's TripAdvisor is violating the basic rules of business. They are no longer serving anyone well. They don't serve the consumer well. They're not serving travel well. They are only serving themselves. They are violating the key fundamentals of business, which is if it's all about you, you're not a successful business.
Yep.
So I have a meeting at HQ next week. I hope I come out the other side, I have to say, after this.
It may feel like you came out the other side.
All right. So what other stories we got?
Oh, well, we started talking about Facebook's
yeah.
terms
So
of
the changes they've made have been fantastic. Facebook has made really good changes to the platform that makes me wonder why they haven't done this before. Like, let's talk about just some simple platform changes. One, did you notice now when you see a news article on Facebook, there's a little bubble that you can pop open that shows you other news stories that this company has created and shared. What a quick and easy way to get to the bottom of either A, is this potentially not legitimate news, or B, how do I easily find other things that they wrote because I liked this so much? And they've done a good job. Like things like that, if you really think about it, they could have just gone the extreme way, which would have been nothing but downside for the news. Instead, they actually created a ton of upside because now it exposes people to other articles you wrote. You can actually get more of your content out in a single post now. Architecturally, they've sunset some really garbage API stuff that they should have sunsetted a long time ago.
I love that you have to reauthorize the APIs now as well.
Right.
You install an app, you install a quiz, you install a poll, whatever. You have to say, I can't remember if it's 3 months or 6 months later. Yes, I still want this stuff accessing my data.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, and that's fantastic.
That's really good.
Yeah,
and these are good things for Facebook too, because Facebook now, all the conditions that you have to be an advertiser, that you can't sell the data, all those sorts of things, keeps everybody in their ecosystem engaged, direct, first party contact with the advertisers, and
I can't wait.
It makes them stronger.
There's word that they're going to put something in where you have to provide proof that your database that you're uploading, that you have rights to communicate with those people. I can't wait for that.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I can't wait for that.
Which shouldn't be a problem, right? Shouldn't be a problem because everyone's going to adhere to GDPR by May 25th. So
That's right.
no worries whatsoever.
Yeah, so that was part of the Q&A this week was if Facebook is going to behave the same way globally and basically adhere to GDPR outside of the EU. And I mean, how could he not really? I mean, I see that you could, but how could he not and still be credible?
Right.
Well, listen, as
it
stands
they're
today,
already adhering to most of it, even before the legislation comes out, and they have been for a long time.
Yeah, and as it stands today, like, you shouldn't have a problem agreeing to that in general, because the rules and what's been put in place and what the guidance has been is actually pretty good. Yeah. Now, I get hesitancy to say yes to that, because yes means not only because you got to remember the people who are listening to this are the people who elected those people. So they don't have a deep knowledge of this. So when they hear yes, they're going to hear not only yes, Facebook is going to treat everyone to GDPR standards. They think that means forever. And as soon as the European Union sharpens something that becomes commercially unviable, they're not going to. And so I think it's fair that he wasn't overly aggressive in making them confident that they were going to treat everyone that way, because it's an unfair question, because it can be construed to mean, the answer can be construed to mean many different things.
That's right.
And the European Union has been known to sometimes overreach and create things that are not commercially friendly, which is why it's amazing GDPR is so well.
Yeah, it's well crafted and very fair.
Yeah, they did a good job. Yeah. They did a good job making sure that this didn't freak everybody out. And it should be freaking people out because they've got to make a lot of changes in their systems, but not from a perspective of, they have overstepped and they're killing us financially on this in terms of inhibiting our revenues and things like that. Very, very smart move. And I think that's it. They do that and then they go, let's see how this works. Oh, we've got some bad actors here. How do we make the playpen a little bit smaller for those folks and just keep reining them in and try to avoid the collateral, kind of the collateral damage of the people using this for good purposes.
Right.
Yeah. But it really comes to the whole GDPR thing comes down to if you can provide explicit information where, again, the communication where the explicit consent, where they understand how you're using the data, you're actually using the data that way, and they're good with it. That's fine. Everything works.
And here's the thing why most hotels shouldn't have a problem here, because honestly, all they'd have to update is, well, we're collecting your data. We probably will not communicate with you again for at least a year. And when we do,
it will be totally irrelevant.
It will be the same day you checked out this past year, asking you to come back at the same time you stayed this past year.
Yeah, exactly.
So apologize in advance for
Right. I mean, let's be honest on if it's fair disclosure of how we're going to use your data, we're going to leave it in a database.
Yeah.
And every now and then you'll get a coupon from us, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't promise that in a year we won't know how to get into that database or how to access any of it. So it's going to be perfectly safe.
Right.
This is no lie. I had a client that came to me about, this is probably about 18 months ago now, and said, I've got an email database, guest history, that I need to put into your system. And they handed me over a zip drive.
Wow. An actual
physical zip, not a zip file on a hard drive, a zip drive. Which,
was it in a gateway box?
It probably was, to be honest. It's that old. I haven't seen that technology in 10 years, you know? I'm like,
those were really
cool. Data on there. They're like, no, this data is from back then. I'm like, yeah, we're not touching that data.
15 years ago.
And that data, so think how safe that data has been for the last 10 years.
No one can
exactly right. Nobody knows how to hack it. Yeah,
exactly. For sure.
Exactly. They don't even know what they could plug it into any longer.
Right.
No, it was interesting yesterday.
Go find the SCSI interface for my computer.
Exactly. That's right. The HSMAI Marketing Advisory Board had a call yesterday, and they have little point of view discussions, and one of them was talking about GDPR, and we're talking about Facebook things. The astounding part of it, though, were a couple things. One was some sentiment where people were going, "No, we're just relying on our vendors to do that, and they'll take care of it." And it was like, "Oh my God!" And I kind of came back with, "Well, that's not it. If they're doing it, you're getting things from lots of vendors and tying it together and maybe storing it. And this whole thing is based on who is the controller of this information, which is you.
Right.
It's the business, not these other guys. You're responsible.
So if your vendor hasn't reached out to you already on steps you need to take and questions you need to answer, then that vendor is not doing anything for you with GDPR. Actually, it was really bad. I was on a prospect sales call, and I'd asked them, are you guys doing anything GDPR? And they named the vendor that they were pretty sure was taking care of it for them, and I know the vendor. So I called the vendor. I'm like, hey, was just talking to this hotel. They're under the understanding that you guys are completely taking care of GDPR for them. So why don't you go ahead and have a conversation with them to let them know what their responsibility is. And they were like, oh my God, thank you. And I'm like, yeah, you may want to possibly put something out to all your customers.
I'm shocked, as a vendor, when we have, and of course we sell to hotel companies and individual properties. And I'm just shocked at how little our customers are coming after us to make sure that we're compliant or that we're moving in that direction. And that we're going to be right. Yeah. I mean,
we have two that had us go through the process with them.
So, and of course, we want to protect ourselves. So we're just doing it, right. To make sure that we are in the right space. Cause those punitive fines are really punitive. And so we are not going to put ourselves in that position, but I am just shocked when I talk to, now I manage mostly, I have 3 vendors. They're all in the state. 3 suppliers. They're all in the States, but they're all international. They all have hotels outside the US. And certainly they have, all 3 of them have huge guest grouping in the EU. And I'm just shocked.
Right. But here's the thing about this that's crazy is, if you have a database of, 10,000 names, right? And you don't know where those people live because it's just an email address. And now, obviously, in hospitality, usually we do have an address appended, but not always. You know, if it's
Out
just
the Hotwire,
the Hotwire
customer service center, in Omaha.
Yeah, but if you read the guidance, you're not allowed to rely on an address.
Right.
No, I understand, but my point is, if you don't explicitly know where they live and explicitly know that they have opted in and they're given consent and things along those lines, and they actually are residents of the EU, guess what? You have to assume that they all are.
Yep.
Like, that's a real problem.
And,
right?
and the realistic situation, I mean, here's the situation we've been explaining to everyone. You're probably not going to get contacted by the EU. You're more than likely going to get contacted by
the guest.
No. By your ownership company, by your legal firm, or by your insurance company. And the question is going to most likely be, hey, what steps have you taken to work towards the GDPR standard?
Right.
And if your answer after the 25th of May is nothing, you have a high likelihood that you're going to be told by whoever your boss is that you're no longer allowed to use that database because you can't risk.
That's right.
You can't risk, being fined for your database, which literally means overnight your database becomes completely invalidated.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we've been saying this, and I had a couple of people push back on us saying you're fear mongering. Well, first of all, we don't sell anything for GDPR. We're just trying to get everyone understanding you don't have to do a lot. It's actually not overly hard to at least do the basics. And you really, first of all, there's no such thing as being completely compliant because it's not figured out yet. Also, there are no GDPR experts because it's not cut and dry yet. So all you need to have is the foundation laid of compliance, and you need to show that you've at least made an effort to understand what's going on and made moves to attempt to do some version of what they're giving guidance on. If you haven't done any of that, you will be told by someone. And believe it or not, Lauren called me last week with you were right. One of my clients just forwarded me an email that actually originated from their asset manager down to IT. That got forwarded to the GM. GM just forwarded it to me and said, what do we do? I was like, that's exactly it.
I hate to agree with that, but the two clients that have reached out to us about GDPR proactively, both of them came from their attorneys. So that he's 100% right.
So when Safe Harbor was invalidated, 2 years ago, we at Nor1, we actually had two of our hotels in Europe were contacted by guests who said, Safe Harbor's been, they didn't say Safe Harbor's been invalidated, but they said, I got this email and you shouldn't have sent me this email. Or I got this offer and you shouldn't have sent me. I should not have seen this offer. So our expectation, based on our product set, is the calls to action are guest facing. And European individuals are quite protective of their data. And so our expectation is that we're going to see more inquiries from guests themselves saying, are you using my data in the right way? And so what they do is they go to the hotel and the hotel turns around and talks to us. So for us, our expectation is we may get some of that from the asset managers because we're operating in hotels that asset managers own, but we're seeing more of it directly from the guest.
And I think you just said something that's really important, and I think most people miss. The data is the guest's data. It is not the hotel's data. It's not your database. It is a database of guest data that they
It's
own.
a warehouse of other
they have given you the right
with permission.
Permission to.
We talked about it on the podcast, and Pete gave a great example. If I were to give you my cell phone number so you can text me or call me later, that does not give you the right to give every Tom, Dick, and Harry my cell phone number to do with what they choose. So you've got to protect your guest data the exact same way you would, any relationship's data. So think about GDPR that way, and you're going to have a whole lot of an easier time dealing with your database.
Well, but this marketing advisory board some of it was shocking, where 2 or 3 people mentioned their IT groups, just nothing, absolute, just dragging their feet, no reaction. And even one who said their legal counsel said, don't worry about it. Everything's so screwed up in the U.S. legislatively. There's not going to be anything It's going to be a cusp there and go, man, this is not.
That's my favorite. My
good.
favorite answer, because that's basically the answer is America.
Yeah.
I've gotten a
Isn't
couple
that
of
the answer to everything? Though?
where I'm like, hey, are you guys doing anything around this? Have you hired anyone to look at your procedures or anything? And they're like, no, why would we? We're 100% inside the United States.
So there's
Right.
damn
Thank God
European communists can't touch us.
Thank God you've never had a guest from the EU ever.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
By the way, I
And then
posted,
the last,
posted Stuart's cell phone number just to prove.
yeah,
it is
exactly.
to do that.
That's funny.
Actually, I made up that phone number. I don't know whose it is.
That's funny. I'm sure a lot of people are
Right.
going to call it.
Now that poor person of all the fans who are calling, just the, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
all the Stuart Butler groupies are going to be
I
calling
know.
that.
I know.
And stuff.
Yeah. They're all outside.
What will they do?
All right, so we covered somewhat
Facebook and
Facebook.
GDPR.
We beat that dead horse.
Can
Oh,
someone
there was
answer
also
for me? Hold on, there is a news story you put up that I need to understand. So it's the Wyndham news story.
oh, some of them I threw in there being Friday the 13th. Some of these were not great stories and were highly
what I wanna
flawed. There were two of them.
First of all, was it satire? Was this a satire article? Because how does adding by Wyndham boost performance of any of these brands versus they were already well known? Like, does Wyndham have any poorly known brands that adding by Wyndham
I'll give you.
reaches
I'll
a
give you
consumer?
I think so. I think there's a
Step into
point.
this one. And I will jump into the Wyndham fray on this one. So when I worked,
That's why I
at
wanted to
Wyndham-
talk about it because
Yeah. Normally I run away from these, but this one I feel pretty safe on because for two reasons. One,
You checked with Tammy earlier.
No. I think it's a great idea. I pushed hard for stuff like this during my time at Wyndham. And there's two reasons, and we saw data. Now, I haven't worked there in 11 years, so my data's out of date, but I bet it hasn't changed a lot, okay? We did a thing called alt sell, right? Which was the first time we ever cross-sold our brands, alternative sell. First time we ever cross-sold our brands then. And the challenge we had with it at the time was, if you were a franchisee of a brand, didn't matter which one, that was the brand you signed up with. You wanted to have that identity. You didn't want to lose, what made that brand distinct, right? So there were a lot of brands who were very much opposed to cross-selling from that perspective. And so the way we rolled it out was if you did a search for, let's say, Orlando, and all the properties in the brand were sold out in Orlando, we would show you all of the sold out properties online. And then we would show alternative properties that you could also book. And
Alternative non-Wyndham properties.
No. These were all Wyndham. This was
They were
Sendon
by
at the
Wyndham.
time. They were by Wyndham, but they weren't called by Wyndham. So if you did a search on, Super 8 and all the Super 8s were sold out, we would then show you Days Inns and Ramadas and Travel Lodges.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Right.
More of what I'm calling it is how does it boost the consumer by adding by Wyndham?
I'm getting there. All of the brands that participated saw uplift, and we actually had to roll it out for sets of brands because some brands wouldn't do it at the time. Right. So, but all of the brands saw uplift and things like that. And then we started moving towards more aggressive cross-selling, and it got better and better over time. Anyway, I left the company, fast forward 11 years. What does a brand provide to a hotel today if you're a franchisee? They provide distribution services. They provide some level of tech stack. They provide things like volume purchasing and all that good stuff. I mean, I don't want to minimize any of that. Design work, right? And a loyalty program. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. If you are a brand that, is part of a chain, right? And people don't know that the brand chain is the name of the loyalty program. I know that I can, I go to a specific hotel, if I go to a Comfort Inn, right? And I book a Comfort Inn and I don't know that Quality Inn is part of the same family. Am I ever going to try to earn or burn Quality? And does the loyalty program itself have less value to me, right? If I stay at a Holiday Inn and I don't know that I can earn or burn at an Intercon, that's a real problem. And so I think doing this creates an opportunity for people to say, oh, wait, if I stay at a Super 8, I can also stay at a Days Inn, or I can also do this, and I can also earn there and use my points of a Super 8. I think it's a great thing for them. And I think they're going to see a lot of benefit because it makes the loyalty program more valuable. And increasingly, in an era of asset light, brands are loyalty programs and all the other stuff they provide. But the loyalty program is the core to it.
And it worked well for Marriott, right? Because originally Fairfield Inns and Courtyards and particularly Residence Inns, that sort of thing, were not.
Except for
they added by Marriott.
Yeah, because there's a brand new Town Place Suites that just went up, and it's Town Place Suites by Marriott is the signage on the building. It looks god awful because it is so wordy, and the building's only so big. Like, the only thing I say here is, okay, it boosts the loyalty program, right? I think the way this was premised, right, but this is premised. I mean, we're adding by Wyndham expected to boost 12 brands. You know, when I kind of read into this, I was like, it's a loyalty. It's further pushing the loyalty program, but I also like kind of ask, like, is this that big of a deal? Like, isn't this just kind of an internal decision that, you know, our brand standard is like, I mean,
no, it's a big deal for them.
Is it really?
I think so. And I think it goes beyond the loyalty program. Honestly, we had the fortune to be able to see data. We worked with a group in a resort destination that were independent properties, and they were purchased by Wyndham about 10 years ago and rebranded as same property group name by Wyndham. They don't accept the Wyndham rewards. You can earn Wyndham rewards there, but you can't redeem them. And they saw a pretty significant boost just from that rebranding. And I think it's more to do with, you know, a perception of quality or a perception of expectations and things like that. I think it legitimizes you to have a Wyndham stamp. And I you know, we're in the industry. I don't think the average consumer understands the ecosystem we live in. You know, Marriott, Starwood has 30 plus brands. I can't name all 30. Most consumers can't name all 30. I doubt anyone but Tim can name all of the Wyndham brands right now. You know, so
I can't name all the Wyndham brands.
Right. So I think that's exactly right. I think one of the reasons Wyndham is doing this is because these global hotel companies have allowed brand names to proliferate to the point where, to Stuart's point, Marriott Starwood has 30 brand names. So how is the average consumer supposed to know that an Aloft is Starwood and not something else? I mean, there are just so many brands that there's so many brand names that, in a way, it's not a step backwards, but it seems to me that it's a way that Wyndham is acknowledging that they have not managed branding and these multiple brand names particularly well to create some cohesive vision of the brand in the consumer's mind.
So what's been the problem that stopped them from doing this? Like, I guess what I'm not understanding is, why is this such a big deal? Like, why wasn't this just like, oh, hey, here's the new signage rules for Days Inn. It's Days Inn by Wyndham.
You know,
they were just looking to capitalize on it. That's all.
Yeah, but I think there's some pushback, right? Because
there's pushback for sure.
Not just internally, but also for potentially from owners. Because an owner that has a specific brand flag under Wyndham, they're reassured that they're not going to be having to compete with another one of those on the same street or within a certain vicinity, or you know, there's certain rules, right? That's why these franchises, these brands.
If you're an owner and you fell for that sales pitch,
there's a lot of people, man. I mean, that's why they have so many.
I mean, and listen, this is why I've always had a hard time with brands, is because my experience in the travel industry was coming up in the travel industry in Orlando, where brand saturation for every single brand exists. Sure. Where I could not understand why you would ever fly a flag where literally there are 20 other entities under that collection of family loyalty program in your market. And, you know, oh, by the way, you're also agreeing to rules of engagement on how you're going to attract consumers in a lot of cases and things like that. So you're agreeing that you're about to be assimilated into the Borg of Orlando.
Yeah, but hold on, Ed. Hold on. I'm going to push back on this. for a second. I get what you're saying, right? But think about a lot of the legacy brands that Wyndham has. Think about a lot of the legacy brands that Choice has. Think about a lot of the legacy brands that Intercon has, right? These folks didn't start out opening up a Marriott. They're opening up a 67-room motel that charges $59 a night. The thing that they had before that was a Subway or a 7-Eleven, right? They need the support. They need the training.
No, but listen. Here's my point. I'm arguing Stuart's point, though.
My point is they needed something to differentiate them. So being a Days Inn versus being a Super 8 made a difference because being a Days Inn is what a Days Inn was.
A Days Inn by Wyndham. How you can make an argument that by Wyndham damages Days Inn, that's where I'm lost on this. I'm lost on where it took this long to add by Wyndham. And it wasn't either done quietly because the reason it took so long was like, this is what I'm not understanding is we're hoteliers of the Days Inn franchise saying we don't want to sully the Days Inn name with Wyndham, the really good brand.
That's a little more complicated than that, right? So, Ed, I mean this with nothing but respect, but you yourself have said you've never worked for a large company.
Nope,
right?
Never have, and this is why I'm asking this. I'm asking this question because I don't understand how this is a marketable change.
What's the old line? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. There was years ago, I was just looking for this. Years ago, there was a consent decree between a group of franchisees, one of the brands. This goes back a long time. I don't remember exactly how long, and it probably no longer applies and probably hasn't applied in years. But there was a consent decree when the franchise system was sued by the franchisees to prevent things like cross-selling and the like. Right. And that was in place for decades. Changing from that takes time. And when you have, if you're Marriott, how many franchisees does Marriott have? A gazillion. How many does Wyndham have? A gazillion.
All of them.
How many? Right. Changing that culture to where, you're not going to get sued by 10%. You get sued by 10% of your franchisees if you're Marriott or you're Wyndham or things like that. Guess what? That's bigger than every other hotel company that's left.
Right.
The 10%.
Which I get that.
So
I guess I'm just not understanding.
That's why it takes time.
Why a Days Inn flag would fight? I could understand the reverse.
They would have fought it hard if it was in the Sendon days.
What if it was Days Inn? What if it was Wyndham by Days Inn? I could at least understand that.
Right. But again, culture change.
Right. Or what's the high-end brand that Wyndham has?
Wyndham. It's Wyndham.
No. They have a brand above it.
They have Wyndham Grand. They have Wyndham Grand.
The one they acquired. It starts with an S or something. It's like a really fancy schmancy collection of hotels.
Oh, Dolce.
Dolce. So I kind of get a Dolce franchise saying, hey, I have a problem with the by Wyndham.
Dolce's but Dolce's conference centers, right? I mean, they're
hotels,
mostly meeting brand.
Yeah. Having stayed,
they're fancy.
Yeah,
I mean, so I get.
But I think the plays for
brand is potentially lower standard than the brand that's being pushed. I get that mentality of fighting that. If you're the budget brand of a mother brand that has Marriott's type of brand history, I just can't fathom what the downside of adding by Marriott would be.
I don't think there is downside. I think it's the culture change of getting a franchisee base to say, okay, I'm comfortable enough that I understand Wyndham as a company enough now that you're adding something, you're not taking something away.
Right.
Culture is hard to shift.
Sure.
The net positive, their understanding is the net positive of that exceeds the negative of, I'm a Days Inn and there's a Ramada I think there's still one Howard Johnson. So I'm not sure if they're gone.
I think saturation.
There's a lot of Howard Johnsons out there. There's about 400.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Okay. Good.
The
restaurant. The restaurants. That's right. The restaurants are gone.
In a very interesting way as a brand. I'm finding that the Howard Johnsons that are left are not at all what you used to picture Howard Johnson as. They're very interesting properties.
They're cool properties.
They do a very cool retro type thing. Yeah.
So I was at the Radisson Americas brand conference last week in Orlando. And so it was the the rah-rah meeting immediately post rebranding from Carlson to Radisson Hotel Group, because they had to give up the Carlson name once H&A acquired Carlson Hotels and Resorts. So so it was the first time that at least the Americas corporate entity faced its franchisees. So all the franchisees come, it's like 1,500 people, and it was GMs and directors of sales, lots of spouses were there, and the entire corporate entity of Radisson Americas. And it was a lot. There were brand meetings where they rolled out the value of the Radisson brand. And, so now they have to take Radisson from the Radisson Hotel brand, Radisson Red, Radisson Blue, and now make it this corporate entity without stepping on the branding of Radisson Red, Radisson Blue. It was fascinating conversations to be in. And I talked to a lot of franchisees about it just to see, because they're one of our global customers, and we were there as a vendor. And it was really interesting. Everyone's just sort of waiting to see how the market reacts, and if travelers are going to be confused or not. And of course, all that hinges on the message that the corporate entity delivers into the marketplace.
Well, Radisson has, now correct me if I'm wrong, did Radisson have any non-Radisson named brands that were that brand by Carlson?
Their soft brand was Corvus or something like that. I know.
Yeah, so
but it was by
Parkin.
Right? Like
nope, it was just Corvus. I know all of this.
Countryans and Suites.
Countryans and Suites. Were they by Radisson or were they by Carlson? Like in their brand?
They were by Carlson. So
like I could see a Country Inn and Suites being a little bit nervous. But anyone like Park Inn, which was Park Inn by Radisson, like I can't see how they could be overly nervous about the lack of Carlson, which was never present in their brand name.
Yeah, I mean, Carlson was just a family name, right? So there was never a brand associated with Carlson. It was the family name, the owning entity name. I mean, they had to change their rewards program now is Radisson Rewards. It was Club Carlson, which really didn't have a whole lot of resonance in the marketplace, because again, Carlson was.
You need people to actually be loyal to a loyalty program in order for them to care about the name of the loyalty program.
But being in the middle of all of that and listening to their rebranding and how they talk to their franchisees is fascinating.
And this is my question: did they do a good job?
So I talked to, me as a vendor, I don't have the right, way to evaluate. So that's why I talked to a lot of the franchisees, and I said, what do you think? And they said, we're okay with it. Most of them said, as long as the system contribution doesn't change, I'm fine. Right. There were several of them that said, we don't care as long as the revenue doesn't drop, and we
then they did a good job.
Right. But there were some who said, especially Country Inn and Suites franchisees who, to Ed's point, thought the uplift was positive, because now they went from Country Inn and Suites by Carlson, which is kind of an unknown brand, to Country Inn and Suites by Radisson, which is a more upscale brand. So they see that there's a little bit of polish that's rubbing off on them by that. So some of the country people were positive about it.
I'd be jazzed, because I'm wondering consumer awareness of what a Carlson is anyways.
Right. That's exactly right.
Exactly right. Where I think there's probably a bit more consumer awareness of what a Radisson.
Yeah.
Probably not that.
Certainly more than by Carlson.
Certainly more than Carlson. Yeah, absolutely more.
Yeah, the Radisson brand itself, that chain of properties with the Radisson name, mostly in the States, there aren't lots of Radissons. In Europe, there are lots and lots of Radisson Blues in Europe. Right. Which are almost wholly run by Residor, which is a management company and licensee to Carlson. Right? It's really confusing.
Yeah, their ownership structure is interesting.
Right. But
Radisson Blue, though, is a cool brand.
It is a cool brand. There's only a couple of them here in the States, but they're all over Europe. The Radisson.
And now Red's coming out too.
Yeah, which is like an Aloft kind of thing, a millennial targeted brand. I stayed at the one in Minneapolis. Yeah,
I love Aloft.
Yeah, whenever I go to our offices in California, I always stay at the closest Aloft.
The Aloft at the Excel Center is probably my favorite hotel, because it makes going to World Travel Market just so much better. Because you literally walk out the door and you're in the Excel.
Yes, right there. Yeah. I've had a couple of cocktails in that lobby.
But I think the through line is you have to have some way to tie these.
That just killed the conversation?
No.
No, not at all.
We're all thinking about cocktails now.
Yeah, we're all
cocktails like Cocktails.
Yeah, we all.
So anyway, branding. I find branding in the hotel industry to be so fascinating, to be so interesting. So what Wyndham's done, I think it's mostly positive. What Radisson done is challenging.
Right. I mean, but it's so important. I'm more asking, like, why is it just now?
Because
I know. But this is why I was asking this. Like, why didn't you invest? Like, the day you acquired, why didn't you invest in at least starting laying aggressive groundwork to selling the value of being part of the Wyndham family? Because here's the thing, culture, yes.
Wait, I can answer that, though. I can absolutely answer that. Because when and I was there then, and this is old enough that I'm sure this has aged out of reality, but I can tell you for a fact, on the day we bought Wyndham and on the day we spun off from Cendant and became Wyndham, we deliberately had to be very clear to our very active franchisee base that they weren't going to lose the thing that made their brand their brand.
Right.
So that was a promise that was made to the franchisees. So you couldn't aggressively lay the groundwork to do it because it would have been entirely contrary to what we were asked by the franchisees to explicitly not do at that time. That's 13 years ago. Right? I mean, that took time for people to change their minds about that.
And 20 years ago, it was Hospitality Franchise Systems, right? Henry Silverman started HFS, and that's when they started rolling together. Days and Ramada and everything. That's where they grabbed. Wyndham was a late ad, right? That Wyndham was 13 years ago or something like that.
Isn't it still the smallest hotel collection of all the brands inside the brand? Or has it grown?
Dolce, probably.
Wyndham?
Well, Dolce, I guess Dolce.
One of the two is probably the smaller.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
but so to your point, then Ed, you probably should be happy with what Radisson has chosen to do, right? Because they took it over, and they just went start to finish in the rebranding.
And they did do it, by the way, in places. So Wingate Inns, which had been a standalone brand for a long time, became Wingate by Wyndham. During my tenure there. So again, at least 10 years ago, at least 10 or 11 years ago.
Listen. My job on this show is to play Monday morning quarterback, and I look at Wyndham finally adding their brand to assets that they bought over 13 years ago, or they were part of. Like, I just asked the question
20 some years ago.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't own Wyndham until 13 years.
Right. So at the point you
years.
decided your company name was Wyndham. Okay. Like, to simplify this whole statement, how you don't immediately start selling the value proposition, and then in the wins you get, like the Wingate by Wyndham, showing the data of the impact of adding by Wyndham to Wingate, kind of feel like we could have gotten to by Wyndham 7 years earlier.
I don't know.
All the
Wyndham
problems you have put in front of me, which I think are legitimate problems.
Yeah.
Right, but that was my other. I questioned, and again, I'm Monday morning quarterbacking this. I questioned the decision to move from Cendant's name to Wyndham because at the time, Wyndham was a tiny hotel group that, consumer-wise, has had far less brand value than Days Inn.
Actually, no, the Cendant name. Now, this I can definitely talk about. The Cendant name was a name they were never going to market publicly.
Right.
Never, ever,
but
ever.
What I'm saying
no. You need to know why.
Okay.
You need to know why. The best thing that ever happened to Cendant as a company, right, was a little thing called Enron.
Oh.
Because Cendant, the company, when it was formed from the merger of HFS and Trilegent Loyalty Solutions, right?
Yeah.
When those two companies merged, it turned out that the Loyalty Solutions company that they bought, that the HFS had bought, had been cooking the books. Right. The president of Trilegent, and I might have the name wrong, but the president of Loyalty
Don't
Solutions,
misquote the name then.
It was like some consumer club thing. I can't remember.
Some consumer club thing. So Henry Silverman, who was the president and CEO of HFS, merged his company, bought his company with this Loyalty Solutions company, right? And the Loyalty Solutions Company's president became the president of Cendant, and Henry Silverman became the chairman of the board. And then within a year, they found out all these things about how much the Loyalty Solutions Company had been cooking the books. The president and CEO was fired. He ended up doing jail time for this.
Oh, yeah.
And on the day that this was announced, No, this is before Enron.
Oh, okay.
And on the day that that he was fired, this all came out, and Henry Silverman went to the street and said, "We got screwed. Here's what happened, etc." Cendant Corporation, which was the new company, had the single largest one-day share loss in the history of the United States stock market.
Wow.
Until Enron came along.
No.
Shelled. Right, and Enron came along about 4 months later. But
it's the best thing that can happen to you in crisis.
There was a decision. Yeah, there was a decision made at the time that from that moment on, they were never going to market the Cendant brand publicly. Ever.
And is that why they acquired Wyndham to use?
They acquired.
Oh, they needed a luxury brand.
They needed a luxury brand.
Okay.
And then when they spun off Cendant into 4 companies, one of which became Travelport, one of which, because we owned Orbitz at the time, and we owned Travelport, and we owned Amadeus. Not Amadeus, Galileo.
WorldSpan. Galileo, WorldSpan.
Galileo and WorldSpan. So when they spun off Travelport, when they spun off what is today Realogy, which was Coldwell Banker and
Century 21 and ERA Real Estate,
Yeah, and Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate. So they spun that off. And when they spun off Avis Budget Group into these separate companies, they needed a name for the new spin-off of the hospitality and timeshare business, and they decided the brand that was best of all the brands that were already owned was Wyndham. But it could have been not only any of the hotel brands, but we owned, oh God, Robert, you were there. What were some of the timeshare brands that were big in Europe?
They owned Fairfield Resorts, the largest
Fairfield Resorts.
They owned RCI, the largest exchange.
Right. Yeah. So we could have become RCI. We could have become Fairfield Hotels and Resorts. We could have become lots of things. Just they chose the Wyndham Hotel brand
for Marriott.
Yeah, right. But it was that was a decision that was made at the time, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't buy Wyndham
again.
To spin off.
Monday morning quarterbacking. At the point they picked the name, I think this work should have been a focus of adding the buy Wyndham. I think
Wyndham wasn't that well known back then. Wyndham was relatively poorly known.
It's the same reason. Like, look at Starwood. Look at how Starwood was ridiculed for branding Starwood. Although I think it was probably one of the better things they did to lift a brand above a hotel. There's not a Starwood hotel. I thought that was brilliant, and they did it aggressively. They did it quickly. Obviously, their franchise accepted it. This is my point. On Monday morning quarterbacking, saying Wyndham should have happened 7 years ago.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to push back on it for one very quick reason. Because no, for real, I'm going to push back on it for one really quick reason. Because I think the world of Steve Holmes, who's the CEO of Wyndham Worldwide, I think he's one of the genuinely good guys in the industry. I think he's a really smart guy. And Wyndham's stock price has averaged about an 11% lift every year for the last 5 years. So they seem to be doing a pretty good job of running their business.
No question.
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Can we talk about something else?
Actually, we absolutely can and should. I need to run, unfortunately. So y'all can talk about something else.
Yeah,
but I can't talk about it.
Tim, the education was fantastic on this show.
Well, thanks. Tried to explain it
the Wayback Machine.
That's right.
Exactly.
Anyway, sorry for the history lesson, but since you asked, I
thought it was good.
Cool. All right. So I have to bail.
Where can people find you, Tim?
They can find me at timpeter.com or on Twitter using the Twitter handle @TCPeter.
All right,
so
Tim.
Thank you all very much.
Have a fantastic weekend, Tim. Bye.
All right. Bye.
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 So I want to talk about Sabre. I thought
you want to talk about Sabre. We can talk about Sabre.
I thought that Skift article about Sabre was pretty interesting. I didn't go to the Sabre conference this week, but we're a trading partner with Sabre, and there's just a lot of stuff in that article.
Yes, I mean this was a very jam-packed article. The one thing that stuck out to me was it in this article that we found out that Radisson isn't moving forward with the Sabre platform?
Well, so that's correct. They announced it at the Radisson event last week, but those of us who were involved in it knew they made that decision a while back. But yeah, they're not moving forward with the digital platform. So they were moving their website onto the Sabre digital platform. And yeah, they decided not to, and it's unclear. What they didn't say, so Kevin Carl, who is the CIO now of Radisson, made a big song and dance about Emma, the Radisson's white labeled, they call their new technology platform Emma. And right. they didn't say what platform they were going to be using for their new website, but they also.
So this is just for the web architecture. I thought they were moving on to Sabre's CRS platform.
The property management system too. Yeah.
Well, so this Emma thing is actually based on Indra, which is a Spanish CRS PMS. I guess it's in use by maybe NH hotels, which H&A.
No, I thought NH was on Adiso.
Yeah. So it's somewhere. It's in use somewhere, especially in Spain. So that's actually the platform that Radisson has chosen for, according to the public stuff that's been announced out of the Radisson conference, PMS, CRS, CMS, and web platform, which is a very
So they're like
very ambitious undertaking.
Moving away from Opera for the PMS.
They want to. Want to. Yep, and away from they have their residents.
Hold on, courtesy. I completely understand why they're moving away from that. I don't think anyone would question anything they go to will be better than courtesy, unless they go to like Holodecks.
And Amadeus is trying to change that.
Right. I mean, well, that's why I picked on it because it's been kept alive for too long. Courtesy, same thing. I mean, I remember writing APIs into Courtesy at EasyYield and just holy crap.
Yeah. I'm reviewing their XBS documentation as we speak. Right, which is the pipe into Courtesy.
Don't ask a question.
So with the Sabre
it's actually plumbing. It's actually plumbing.
It is actual physical plumbing.
It is plumbing.
It's lead piping, actually.
That's exactly right. Lots of lead.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Radisson did move off the Sabre digital platform, but it looks like Sabre they said a lot of stuff this week.
Yeah, the Sendyne relationship.
Yep.
That was interesting.
My gosh, I mean, listen, I'm going to call it now. Sabre buys Sendyne because you can't unravel it. Like if they're really doing what they're positioning it as, like if this is going to be more than just we integrated, right. I mean, if they're really doing what they're saying they're doing, they basically have pre-purchased Sendyne, and quite honestly, they have to buy Sendyne before TravelClick does now, because TravelClick is fine with going, if we buy this company, it yanks these relationships.
Right.
All right. We buy companies. It's interesting. It's interesting, and it almost makes me wonder if it was done with any form of investment, because that's a high risk partnership. Without some type of ownership or something like that. I mean, it's one thing for two small companies to go, hey, let's build something cool together, because you're both small companies. But when you're talking about someone the size of Sabre doing something, someone the size of Sendyne's gotten quite large.
Right.
It's like the writing's on the wall. Sendyne will be owned by Sabre.
Right.
Well, but it's interesting. Sabre's been doing that for a long time, though, in the revenue management space, and I think it's interesting they haven't made a move on it. I mean, Ideas is probably too big.
SAS is not.
Well, Ideas is owned by SAS. And SAS is so happy. They're so happy.
Totally.
Yeah,
and Rainmaker they could do, but Rainmaker's mostly in the casino. That's not really their core, their core thing. Duetto has a massive amount of investment, and God knows the multiple off of that doesn't make it good. And you just start going through the list, and there's not a lot. So they've had these kind of relationships to kind of do it. But I think that will have to be their next move: is how do they get a tightly integrated revenue management system in, so they can lock people into their, completely into their ecosystem.
Well, and what about their statement that their new PMS, they're going after Opera? That I found quite interesting.
Which version?
Yeah, exactly.
You want to ask that. Which version of Opera?
Right. Yeah. Are you talking about Fidelio V6 or?
Right. My Fidelio. Which version of Opera?
I find this. So one of the things that struck me at ITB was the number of PMS startups in Europe. There's lots of them. Muse and Apaleo and Guestline and all those guys coming up. And because they're all sort of chewing around the edges of Opera, because the small hotel groups in Europe are just having a hard time affording Oracle, right? So there's a lot of PMS activity over there, not so much over here in the States. So I find this. So last year at Sabre, I went to Sabre's Sabre Hospitality's customer conferences last year, and they presented the PMS, but it wasn't wishware, like they were actually building a product, but it was more of a FYI kind of presentation. Hey, we're working on this, you know, but we're going to start select service like everybody does, right? They go at the low end of functionality.
Well, and they'd acquired, what was the name of it? Yeah, they'd acquired the one for Wyndham, right? Because they had 2/3 of Wyndham, and that's how they got the Wyndham deal, so they could integrate to Nexus.
Something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, whatever.
But here's the thing. First of all, it's a great time to be a small select service hotel because you have the most competitive PMS market that's ever existed in our history. Because I mean, all the major players who are trying to launch cloud platforms are launching to that market. All the startups are launching to that market.
And it's great modern technology, you know, really rational messaging systems.
The one mistake I think all of these companies are making is they are leaving an opportunity, which is currently only being answered by like the super legacy players. There is the small hotel owner. Okay. And I think about my old business partner, Chris, from the Easy Old days. He owns a lot of hotels in Sydney. He refuses to go to one of these platforms because they're a recurring license PMS, and small properties want to be able to know that if business constricts, they can cut their costs to keep the property performing. And so he refuses to go to a licensed-based property management system. Only buy a property management system that he knows the costs of owning it. So because of that, he's on Room Master, which, you know, they haven't updated anything. And so
I thought you were going to say Fidelio V6.
If he could.
It'd
be an upgrade.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's you know, it's interesting because with Oracle, you know, Oracle is doing everything it possibly can to lift Opera up off the property level and put it into a recurring subscription. And they're also doing that with their Oxys, with their interface mechanisms. And so, like we have an Oxy between our products and Opera, and it was based on the perpetual license on-premise one-time license fee structure. But even our Oxy now, they're repricing on a subscription base on an annual basis. So there's a big European chain that's moving on to the Oxy True cloud-based Opera, and they have our products. And so they're forced into a subscription-based model of the Oxys, which is so much more expensive than
it makes it hard for you to justify your value proposition because Micro's eating it.
Right.
They're eating your value proposition.
They are. That is exactly right, which means that, we're looking, a lot of my time now is spent talking to these PMS startups to understand who's moving where and how much into our existing base are they eating into, so that I need to pay attention to integration, joint marketing efforts, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the good news is some of these new startups have a completely opposite mentality to the antiquated systems. Like here's our public API, anyone can integrate, and we're not going to charge license fees for that. And that to me is where we're heading, but it's going to take a long time because the business is so complex, and these legacy systems are established because they built this complex business logic over such a long time.
Really high walls. They're really high walls,
right? And these new guys are going to be able to come in and chip away at the small European bed and breakfast because they don't have complex business. But if you want to go after a management company and get their complete portfolio, when they're dealing with things like homeowners and they're selling golf and spa and all this other stuff, they're not going to be able to compete on that arena.
That's right.
For a long time.
But and the retraining and everything like that. I mean, and all those
big
stupid interfaces to go into the touch tone phone in the room for the housekeepers to update if it's clean or dirty. All that crap winds up having to get replaced when you pull it. They go, do you have some interface to something that was built 35 years ago? I mean, who knows how old the thing is? And there's nobody to go build anything with those companies either. I mean, mean, they won't do an enhancement to go do something because most of them are under some sort of maintenance agreement from some company who acquired the service, the service revenue stream, right? And no enhancements. It's just like we will patch whatever is broken and put it back to whatever the stable version is, and no new code.
The Skift article makes a good point. Most hotel front office staff have worked with Opera at some time in their career.
Oh yeah.
So the training curve for a new front desk staff is really flat because more than likely they have worked with Opera some version of Opera in the past, and bringing them up to speed on it is quick. And I had never really thought about that. But
which is lucky because their support is terrible. Right? So the support and training piece of Opera is probably their weakest.
I mean, not only for their hotels, not only for their customers, but for their partners as well.
Why invest in it when you don't have to?
Yeah. Well, they might have to soon. I'd love to see their installation, new installation versus who's leaving them. They've got to be having a huge amount of attrition.
I don't know, man. Name a single good replacement without going into the complexity. I mean, you saw my response to the question that was posed to all of us on what advice would you give a client that's looking to change from a PMS? And I guarantee you get past the steps that I gave you, and they're not going to find enough benefit to move because you are not moving from a horrible situation to an amazing situation. You're moving from whatever your situation is to a similar situation with different variables.
With probably a subset of the functionality, and that's the killer, right? Because they go, but it doesn't do this, and then we've got to get something else to plug in, and that's going to be even more complicated. And
the reason I came up with that list is I actually had a close hotel client of mine say, hey, by the way, we're moving our PMS. And I was like, wow, like they're on one of the big ones, and they're a big property. And so I took them through those steps. So the quote they had to go to the new PMS was like $600,000.
Holy!
Wow!
No.
It's a big
by step 3, it was over 1.4 million because it was all
the other related,
all the stuff that I told them they needed to look into. Point of sale system needs to be replaced. Well, we just bought this point of sale system last year. Doesn't matter. It doesn't work with this PMS, so you got to buy theirs. And it quickly ballooned. But the other thing they found was, by the way, you're 6 versions behind on the platform you have, and half the things you're worried about has been addressed.
Right.
And, and then you're left with maybe, I think they were left with like 40 grand of negative impact on staying. Like they attributed it was like a 40 grand loss to keep on this. And then they realized, oh crap, it's not worth moving because there's nothing that's better. Like if you're on one of the legit PMSs, you will not get that much better by moving to one of the other big PMSs. Like it's just, yes, you may fix this issue for you, and you're going to find this issue is of equal value. I mean, and you just swapped.
Right. Even to Stuart's point about open APIs. I mean, we look at a lot of APIs, especially the open ones, right? We just sign up for it and go look at them. And, just because it's free and open doesn't mean it's good. And so I mean, we're more than willing. So we're in the process of writing new integration to 2 PMSs, and one of them is going to charge us a substantial amount of money. But because their code is so rational, it's going to take us half the time to write to it.
That's a great
example. It will take us to write to the PMS whose API is open and free, and they're not going to charge us, but their code is crap. And so it's going to be actually almost 3 times we estimate the man hours to write to the free one as it is to the one that's going to charge us, but it's much more rational code. So that's another piece that, of course, a hotel owner or a hotel operator is not going to say, what's your code base look like, right? They're never going to do that. So that's where, a good.
Well, and even if somebody answered that question, that's not a good conversation. They're going to want to stop that conversation really, really quickly.
Right. But that has so much.
The system, which was originally written, is really solid. But all the stuff we bolted onto it,
right.
I
that stuff has so much hidden cost to it.
It does, you're right. I have a prediction for the industry. I've heard rumblings of at least 2 or 3 of the big guys have investors sniffing around, and in some cases it's overlap investors. So I've got a feeling in the next 2 years we're going to see some major consolidation in the PMS side.
That's where the value is. The value is if someone buys the top 3 PMS vendors and normalizes the install and fixes the commercial model.
Right.
They own the market.
I think someone's going to have to do it, right? Because they all want to go to this web-based solution, right? There's a demand for it. There's a very compelling business argument as to why you'd have a single shared code base versus all these installed versions. So they all want to do it, but they're all fearful of it because if big company A goes and builds this new UI, new system, and they're forcing their own customers to go through all these hoops of changing to their new system, they're at risk to lose those guys that are disgruntled.
Absolutely.
That's a big risk. But if they own all their competitors, that risk is diminished, and they have one universal web-based solution that all these disparate systems switch and upgrade to. That's a win, and you basically cornered the market at that point.
And the numbers, I can only talk to 1998 figures on doing that strategy, because that was a strategy I put forward to Sabre, ironically, which is how we got on this topic. So that's what we looked at, because we looked at acquiring Micros Fidelia, right? And it was at that time was $500 million, and Sabre had $800 million in the bank. But that wasn't, they were never going to do it. They couldn't cope with the point of sale. But the second one was HIS, who had 3 different platforms, a larger installed base. And it was like, you grab these guys, you figure out between Windows NT and AS400 and Unix and all this crap. Yeah, it's probably going to go with Unix, but that's okay. At least we've got them. We can nurture them along. We can structure these deals, and then integrate into CRS. At least the numbers that we had, which, hey, we paid McKinsey $500,000 to
Is that all?
2 months.
So 1% of the deal value.
Year four stable. We had 3 different investment profiles: 30 million, 60 million, 90 million. The 30 million was to buy HIS, who was borderline bankrupt and had all this. It wound up with Infor eventually after going through SoftBank or something like that. But it was $680 million a year at 27% margins.
Well, here's the bigger issue.
And Sabre passed on that opportunity because they had been burnt by Confirm. They had botched the Confirm project, so they didn't do that. They didn't like hotels.
If the rumblings are true and someone does truly come in and buy the large owners of the PMS customer base, and then they actually fix it, that's a huge problem for a lot of companies who currently exist because the PMSs were designed incorrectly. So if you buy the install base of the top installed PMSs and you rewrite it correctly, then there is no longer a need for a CRS. And then there's, and by the way, if you build the CRS functionality correctly, there's no longer a need for channel managers.
Channel managers, right.
And if you build all of that also correctly, it will kill point of sale systems. Like, I mean, you actually, if the property, if it was true that this was a property management system, core functions of that should never have allowed business models like CRS to exist. Right. And so that's
revenue management software, right?
Or revenue management, all that stuff, all those ancillaries, and you're right.
Business intelligence.
It winds up. What you need is some sort of enterprise service bus that you can bolt this stuff onto. But you can't. And there are 2 or 3 companies who are out there just trying to say, here we've got this little interface, which is basically a switch, right? I mean, there's not really much. That doesn't do it. That's not enough. You need to actually own those core. You need those core assets where they have the relationships with those.
You need to buy the customer base. If you buy the customer base of the biggest players, and then you fix it, like you take the best of each of them, and understand the models that you need to offer. Because SaaS is not the only model. You need alternative models to SaaS because specific types of businesses,
or regions, location,
So yeah, I mean, you could come in with enough cash. I mean, Blackstone, they've got enough cash. They could come in and buy the space and then lay waste to Sabre. That would lay waste to Amadeus's stock price because they're hanging their whole future on this CRS that they're building for IHG. It would lay waste to TravelClick. Because if all of a sudden you actually built the PMS correctly and had it installed in the top 3 install bases, you would just gut entire sections of this industry overnight.
But that is a big investment with lots of risk, and you're acquiring 3 major things, and your exit occurs after you do the development. That's a tough thing to say. And again, I'm working with a private equity group.
IPO, because after you do that, you're too big.
No, I'm currently working with a private equity group, and I can't talk a lot about it, but they're trying to figure out in the travel space, right? Not just hotels or anything, what they should do. And really interesting. And these guys have the money. You want 400 million, 500, they could do that. But again, they aren't just like, let's throw money at a problem, a strong strategy that makes, with a good, reliable payout. But we have a really interesting conversation.
You'd have to acquire it like Disney bought land in Orlando, though. Like you'd have to do it to where none of them knew you were buying all of them, because man, if you're the last one standing, you're like, premium. I screw your entire plan if I don't sell to you.
But the interesting thing that they're talking about, and the best analogy, they were talking about core assets versus these kind of ancillary things. And the best example was, Concur, right? Because Concur bought Hipmunk, but Concur had the travel management platform and the technology there and all the customers. And then, yes, you can go buy Hipmunk and bolt that on. But if you bought Hipmunk by itself, that's not going to go help you get into travel management and Concur. And that's exactly the same situation in the hotel. You buy the revenue management system or the CRM system, that isn't going to help you get a PMS and all that installed base at all.
Or upselling software, right? That's what we are. We're just an extension of the inventory control application, because the PMS is not a sales tool. The CRS is not a sales tool. So we are. So the limitations of the systems allow companies like Nor1 to exist.
Right.
We're good now.
No, and that's it. And you need something where everything is, you have your database, be it distributed or centralized or however the hell you want to do it, that stuff's written once. And that's that is the core piece of information on that. Is that occupied or vacant, dirty or clean? It's in this thing, how it's exposed to the world. And you can get rid of all those different layers, which again, somebody will do. And interesting, the Oracle guys understand that and kind of they don't necessarily have the business model for it. I will certainly say that, but in terms of looking at their point of sale system and what they've done with the cloud basing, they're doing freaking amazing things, and they've done it. Their problem is, how the hell do they get, as Stuart mentioned, all those people who are on all those old versions of software, the legacy stuff, onto their cloud platform, and then get enough momentum on that where they can start developing it out. And that's a problem, because again, when they go and pitch them, it's like, well, should we do this, or should we look at everything else in the market and maybe we leave and do something different?
So the answer is remove everything else from the market.
Exactly.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
I've had the interesting experience this week of working with Shiji, which is for Oracle Hospitality, the exclusive distributor and support mechanism for Opera in Greater China. Right. And because we have a pilot starting in Greater China, and so we've been dealing with Shiji, and I mean, even the cultural differences, even with the cultural differences and the time zone differences and the language differences, they're still easier to deal with than Oracle.
Actually, we found back in the Micros days that certain resellers were the way to make things happen.
I'm really happy.
I
am really happy we're working with them.
We went through the Asia-Pac reseller to get Micros to fast track the easy old Oxy certification. And we couldn't get anyone at corporate in the U.S. to return a phone call.
Yeah, we can
Right.
do that too.
But that's who the CG guys are. They're all the former, Micros folks in China, and they've gone out and they've bought a bunch of stuff. Like they bought Review Pro, right? And they're out there acquiring all sorts of technology and building.
Yeah.
Yeah, they bought a lot of stuff.
Yeah. But they're great to work with. So I was pretty happy. This means this pilot in Greater China is actually going to go better than I thought it would.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm happy about that. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. So
all right. So did we want to get to
the people think? Oh yeah. Well, I just want to say what do we think about Sabre and their Synixis Property Hub, which is I think what they're calling this.
Which is sort of what we've been talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So one sort of glob of applications.
Yeah, I think
single point of view or whatever.
In their case, I mean, Track Record would say they're going to have a complete vertical solution of nothing of which is best of breed in its specific.
But to be fair, it may not be best of breed. It will be top 3. And if you look at another company that never aiming to be number 1 in any one thing has worked out really well for them, it's Honda.
Mm-hmm.
Honda's goal is to be number 2 in every single thing across the board because overall that makes you number 1.
Sure.
I mean, they bought Synexis and didn't kill it, right? They've actually that product has actually grown functionally and
it took a long time though. That acquisition was 2002, 2003. That was
something like that.
Yeah, and I would argue that's not a top 3 booking engine on the market anymore. It might be in terms of volume, but certainly not in terms of performance.
But from a CRS standpoint, so there's the booking engine, but then there's the CRS, and they don't, they don't have a lot of competition.
They are really the top CRS,
right? For independent properties outside of globals, right? So
brands too. I mean, they power a lot of the brand CRSs.
Wyndham, as an example,
right? Yeah. Omni,
right?
Yeah. So I mean, I listen, I don't think you'll ever get excited about a Sabre forum where you're going to be like, wow, it's so innovative. But I mean, the bottom line is overall, they're a pretty damn good company.
Well, and the other thing that was interesting, it wasn't just the hospitality forum; it was everything. They had the air, and it was the whole unified, unified. Which I thought that was an interesting approach. And I don't think it was just because they saved money running different events. I think they're really going to try to figure out, which is very smart for them. They've got all these airlines who want to sell ancillary products and a hotel. How do they get that all in their?
Right. Although I will say, as a sponsor, the cost doubled from the Sabre Hospitality.
Now you get to talk to airlines. Is that not a value to you?
Doubled for the lowest entry point in a sponsorship. It cost doubled.
I
was like, oh god, I want that in my budget. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well. Okay, so there were 2 Airbnb stories. The Rutrow is that Airbnb is testing eliminating the guest fees. So, as everybody was looking at Airbnb saying, hey, look at this. It's so much less expensive than an OTA because it's only 3%. And it was always like they're trying hitting the guest with 12%. So guess what? Airbnb is looking at doing this, and the fee, if they get rid of the guest fee for the supplier, will be, drumroll, 12%.
Right.
So here they are, welcome to the booking.com.
That's right.
Today.
Until it's 18%.
Right. That's exactly
smart, right. They're super smart in the way they're rolling this out. They're getting people to volunteer to test it for them versus forcing people into something they might not.
All of these OTAs rose to power. It's how TripAdvisor rose to power. Nothing was forced on you. It was
we gave them the power. We handed it to them on a silver platter.
Right, you don't come into this industry with a gun. Because you can just come into the industry and be welcomed in and then slowly work your way up and then go, oh, yes, this is how it works now.
Yeah. This is the new normal. It's a test, but I'd be shocked if this doesn't become the standard.
And by year 3 on the program, it'll be 15%.
Maybe
That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, maybe. Maybe they can make the profit at 12% because they're a much better company than running an efficient company than the big guys. So.
Then Expedia and Booking. I mean, listen,
there's a lot of bloat in those companies.
Yeah, but still, they're fairly well run. For companies of scale, they're fairly well run. Yeah. Compared to other companies of similar scale, even outside of travel.
Yeah, but look at how fast Airbnb developed a very sophisticated user interface, and how long it took, and how much it cost these big guys to create something on par with it.
Well, but that's rational, though, right? Because they don't have to deal with. I mean, they have to aggregate the supply, but they don't have to do anything with the supply other than aggregate it. So they can focus on the retailing. They can focus on the user experience, and they were smart about that.
Yeah,
and their guys all came out of Rhode Island School of Design, and they were all design consumer focused people. I mean, that was the whole.
So the leadership of their company are design oriented, which means there's no one with a opinion that doesn't really matter. That just because of their position, they get to infuse it. Anyways. I mean,
there was nobody saying, "Well, we used to do it like this," or the industry does it like that.
I like blue, so we're doing blue.
Yeah. Right. But the numbers of times Chesky goes out like on Twitter and asks people questions about, what do you think about this? I mean, he's out there, first person. So the other, and they hired Chip Conley, right? That was the other thing to teach them about hospitality, which was
but after they were already established, right? So if they brought somebody like Chip Conley in the early days, they would not have turned into the company that they are.
Right. No, they already had
Conley, basically.
Yeah, they had A-list VCs behind them, so they had some adult supervision. They were running it. They had their vision, and then they go, we need some specific expertise here. Hey, here's a smart guy who's done some interesting things. And completely got the culture and everything too, right? So the other thing, though, is there's another Airbnb article about Airbnb opening its doors to branded room aggregators. So you now have bed banks or individual groups aggregating these things, putting their hotel rooms out on Airbnb, and they seem to be loving it too. So it's going to be
like they are following in lockstep operationally what you do to build an OTA. So they've got the customer acquisition stuff figured out. They figured all that side out. So now how do you scale? Okay, well, you sell inventory that shouldn't be sold online. I mean, that's how most of the Asia Pacific websites lit up. You create models that initially sound really appealing to hotels, and then you slowly ratchet it up to where you're paying for. They're paying for the cost of customer acquisition plus margin and all of that. I mean, they are just going into the 101 of how you launch an OTA.
I agree 100%.
Except they have a lot of the traits of a hotel brand, right? Because of the unique branding of Airbnb and the access to this unique inventory as well.
They're different where they need to be different. They're different where they should be different. And then they are following patterns of success where they don't need to be different.
Absolutely. And so I would say the modern hotel brand needs to be doing that. And all these asset light hotel groups they kind of need to do that stuff, but that's a big problem. You even look at Accor, they tried, with they acquired Fast Booking and things like that. And then, hey, we'll bring in other people. They weren't ready for it. They didn't have it. And now they've jettisoned that because it was hurting their core hotels under their traditional compensation structures. So these guys, they started with a clean slate and have adapted
and they're doing their
and adjusted.
Very strategic. And anyone that thinks that this secondary market integration is a long-term play, it's not. It's a short circuit to get the inventory on the system so that these hotels that are now being sold on there through the secondary market can come and say, well, I need to be on there directly now, right? It's just that they're sleeping with one chick to get the next chick, right? It's smart strategy. It's the old
Fallon,
thing.
Comment on that
jealous to get the other one. This is their one night stand.
Stuart, I'm glad that no one will ever see us as being, like disrespectful. You know, we started out so great with Valen talking about empowering women, and I was worried that was going to send the wrong message.
I had to bring it back down to a misogynistic level.
Wait. No. Yeah, let's get rid of the misogyny. You're hanging out with a guitar player. To maybe get to the drummer. That's the sort of thing. That's a better.
That's better. There you go.
You can be politically correct.
No, but they're not making the mistake that that innovative companies sometimes make. Innovative companies get so hung up on being innovative that they forget that you don't have to be innovative at everything.
Right.
You need to be
Uber?
right.
And that you can fix some of the less sexy stuff. So I stayed at an Airbnb this past weekend for my music camp because it was in this part of Boston. It's sort of 30 miles from my house, and it was really long days, and I wasn't gonna drive from home back and forth every day. So I rented a room in an Airbnb, and what struck me was
a room or a full
room. A room, because the
host was present.
Yes, the host was present. So it was a big Victorian pile of a house in an old, but I liked the host. So the presentation of their house and them on Airbnb was great. I did some messaging. You know, they were an older couple. They own this big pile of a Victorian. They're obviously using it to fund staying there in an expensive neighborhood in Boston. And you know, my own bathroom, my own bedroom, and all I was going to do was sleep there. Wasn't getting in until 11 o'clock at night. I was leaving at 8:30 in the morning. I didn't want to talk to them, but it was frictionless. Like I booked, I paid. I did a couple messagings back and forth with the owners about, you know, where I could put my car and stuff like that. But and then I said, I'll get there in the morning. I'm not coming back till late at night. Don't expect to feed me breakfast. You know, none of that stuff. I showed up. They were like, "Hey, how you doing? Here's your key. Put your car right over there. See you whenever." I mean, it was just frictionless as the person staying, and I thought it was great. I mean, I just really thought it was great.
Better than a comparable hotel. What would if that didn't exist? What would you have done? Would there be a hotel somewhere around there?
Yeah. So there were some. So I really wanted to walk because it's an old, crowded neighborhood of Boston. On-street parking is problematic. There was no parking provided as part of the music camp. So, I mean, where to deal with my car was a big thing. But there were about 5 miles away. There were some budget properties like, you know, maybe a Fairfield Inn or something like that. But I really wanted to walk. I really just wanted to park the car and leave it. And I just
you said that incorrectly. It's pack the car.
Well, I'm not. I live here, but I'm not from here. So, so I just the whole as the guest, it was frictionless. Just like, I mean, really, I walked in, they gave me the key, just like going to a hotel, and then they didn't care what happened to me the rest of the time. Like I didn't need to check in with them. They did bring me a cup of coffee each morning. That was nice, right? So.
There you go. And not something that was on there. We will bring you a cup of coffee every morning as something just that extra. Boy, hospitality. What do you know?
But it was approaching a hotel stay, right? It was approaching that kind of just hotel stay where it didn't have to be a B&B type feel. And I thought that I was really interested in how frictionless the whole thing was.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. And pricing wise for the room versus the hotel 5 miles away where you've got transit thing, was it less expensive? Yep. Cheaper too. Yep. Cheaper. Yeah. Yep. Cheaper, easier, better.
Yeah. I'll say the
hotel companies. And you're alive.
Right.
I mean, because that's the thing about shared. Like the single row.
That's a really good point. So they don't just rent out one room, and I mean they have a big pile of a house. So they don't just rent out one room. There were other people there that weekend, and my room didn't have a lock on it. The door to my room didn't have a lock on it.
What?
Didn't have a lock.
Why would it? It's an Airbnb.
Right.
I mean,
I actually said something to the owners.
That's not shared economy. Like if you're doing the real shared economy, man, you got to be total hippie on it. You got to be hitchhiking there and.
Yeah, my bedroom door didn't have a lock on it.
Cereal out of the same bowl,
and neither did my bathroom door. So the two rooms. So I don't freak out about that kind of stuff. But except when
she's
there were
a drummer in Her Majesty's
until a murderer walks into your room.
Well, so there were 3 other people in the house. They were a group, the 3 friends. And the owners had told me that they would come in late after me, and they were upstairs. And so they were good and quiet. They were good guests, but I could hear them sort of tromping down the hallway and tromping up the stairs and moving around over my head. And I just, it did cross my mind that I had no idea who those people were. And my door didn't lock. And so, you have to sort of, it's a trade-off.
It's adventure. What's travel without fear of death?
But that's something that those hosts could fix very easily, right? That just putting just a little latch on the doors.
And I did give them that feedback.
A couple of dollars hardware, and that problem solved for them.
Right.
Yeah. So all the hotel groups and hotel properties just go, nah, Airbnb's not something. Come on, guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You would have been the ideal hotel guest who knows all about the industry and all the hotel and would be inclined to do that. And they won you. So your next stay, are you more inclined to use an Airbnb or less? What was your net promoter score?
It's purely opportunistic, right? I mean, honestly, if there had been a hotel in walking distance, I would have stayed at a hotel. But there wasn't one. And what was important to me was being within walking distance. So it was absolutely opportunistic on my part. Generally, I'd probably lean more towards a hotel. Yeah. Because, I get a lock on my door.
Sure.
There's at least a thin veil of security that makes you feel comfortable.
Although, obviously, it didn't bother me much. I mean, really, it didn't bother me. But I'm just sort of that way anyway.
The badass rock and roll drummer,
stupidly fearless. That's what my mother said.
Hey, you've gotten this far.
Right. You've made it all the way to this show.
I'm still alive, right?
Still alive.
Yep. So anyway, that was the rut row, because I think the hotel industry should be paying attention to.
Good to be Tarico. They now have a new customer.
Tarico, well, but that's all hotel beds, right? Because hotel beds.
They got a new customer. They're like, oh, look at that Airbnb.
A new distribution channel. That's right.
Absolutely. Yep.
We're going to sell qualified rates on the internet through Airbnb.
Yep. There you go. And unfortunately, the hotel has no idea where that's. It's just it's a Tarico booking.
The challenge Airbnb is going to have with that, though, if you think about it, is the expectation they set on communicating and being able to communicate prior to stay. Like, if you're buying through a bed bank, who are you communicating with then? If you're the renter.
Oh no, the bed bank could still set it up with the hotel. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you're booking it through this, but they don't know. It's just that happens on every wholesale booking that goes through, a hotel only type thing. You book it through Get a Room. You talk to the hotel, you don't even really know the same with Expedia. They don't want to talk to you.
No,
they go talk to the properties.
Yeah, but I mean, Ed's right. The experience of Airbnb is going to evolve now that they're bringing this kind of inventory onto it. The expectation of the guest is going to have to change, because they're not going to get the instant friendly response from someone that actually wants this person to come stay at their home. They're going to get that disgruntled employee response that's really only 50% helpful that you would get if you reached out to a hotel directly. So that's going to impact the Airbnb brand. They've got to be careful of that.
Well, and you've got Booking.com going into shared, and things like that, shared accommodations, as is Expedia, which I think will be I think it'll be really interesting if Airbnb decides to make the move into kind of more boldly full hotels and somehow partition it off, but say, you want to stay in any sort of lodging facility, we've got it. I don't know. That'll be an interesting strategic play for them, but I bet they've thought about it and have some sort of plans laid out to either do that, not do that. Or
they also are going to need the bed bank to be able to have any inventory in Paris. Because did you guys catch that whole debacle?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where Paris is what was the I'm now looking for the article, but in Paris they're being sued for the people that are violating
all the listings.
So every listing they're getting sued, and it's a huge number. Like Paris is going to raise a ton of money off of this because they're just suing Airbnb. Which I don't understand why none of the other governments did that. Like, sue Airbnb, because Airbnb is eventually going to have to step out of it and go, here are the people that are violating your laws.
And they will. And they will.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're not.
And they will. And they're doing that already. They're already doing that in San Francisco. That was the workout that they made with San Francisco. So yeah, they're going whatever market by market to
which is
to go do that.
Why it's even more important again, the hotel business, right? So
exactly. So I have a friend here in Boston who's gotten his leases up, and they pulled the hotel off the market to turn it into an Airbnb. So his landlord is making that a permanent Airbnb. And my friend said, well, I wrote to my 2 state senators, and I said, heck with the state. I said, write to your city councilor, because the mayor of Boston.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. The mayor of Boston is not a big fan of Airbnb. I said, so who cares about the state of Massachusetts? Go to the Boston City Council. And he was like, oh, right. But I mean, he's forced out.
Oh, no. The whole pitch is eliminating affordable housing is what H and LA should have been all over, instead of, you're hurting the hotel companies. I
You're exactly right. H and LA missed that. They missed that. They totally missed that.
Yeah. They were tipped off, but no,
all right, gentlemen. Well, it's coming time for me. So.
I think we just wrap it up. Unless
I think so.
Yeah, it's almost 2. Yeah, let's do it.
I'd say this was quality.
So, time of death, ladies and gentlemen.
Time of death. 1:45 p.m.
All right. So,
the big
are you
plus,
in control, Robert?
We've now figured. Sure. To wrap up, I want to say that we're happy to trade 1 Valen for a Tim and Lauren. That works out.
It's an upgrade.
Well. It was half a Tim. It was a half a Tim. I guess,
yeah. So 1 Valen is greater than one Lauren and half a Tim. I'd agree with that math.
Yeah. Your numbers check out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got nothing to
great.
say to that. I'm totally keeping quiet on that.
So. If you're looking for this show, Lauren does this so much better, because he can take a deep breath before actually saying, I have to take a breath when I say hospitality digital marketing, like in the middle, it's so long. But yeah, these shows are on hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com, on YouTube, and streaming on Facebook. Actually, I'm not sure if we're on Facebook Live. Hard to say. Yeah. We'll have to check. I think just on YouTube. But we're here every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Central, and the cast of folks. Ed, if people want to contact you for some reason,
I don't know why they would.
We wouldn't do that.
You can find out about Flip2 by going to flip.to. You can find me on social media under Edward St. Onge.
And Stuart?
Oh, you can find us anywhere at Fuel Travel. So the site is fueltravel.com, on social media at Fuel Travel. You can listen to our podcast, which, if you want to hear me rant a lot about TripAdvisor, we're going to be publishing this episode on Monday, but it's fueltravel.com/podcast, or just go to the Apple or Google Play Store and you'll find it under Hotel Marketing Podcast. So.
Oh, and before we'll wrap with Valen, but Lauren Gray is not the whatever 18, 20-year-old girl. It's Lauren Gray on Twitter and Hospitality Digital Marketing. And also Tim Peter, which is TC Peter on Twitter, and timpeter.com. You can certainly reach them that way. And last but not least, Valen.
So you can find out more about Nor1 at nor1.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Valen Perini.
Very good. So thanks, folks, for tuning in for us. I'm Robert Cole. I'm at Robert K. Cole on social media and rockcheetah.com. So we will see you here next week. And thanks. And if I hit the off,
hit the red button, you should be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that was fun.
All right. See you guys.
I'm not sure if we're still live or not.